Me and Clara, we'd been a team for 7 solid years. I genuinely thought we had a good thing going, a marriage full of joy and meaning, you know? Together, we'd carved out a life, tackled the typical roller coaster of highs and lows, and forged this connection I figured was rock solid. Lately, though, something's shifted. It crept up slow at first, so subtle I almost missed it. Our chats, once buzzing with energy and chuckles, turned flat and quick. That smooth back and forth we used to have? It's been swapped out for short, snippy replies. I'd ramble about my day, and all I'd get back was a half-hearted nod, like she was barely listening. She quit asking me stuff, stopped cracking up at my dumb jokes. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone hits a rough patch, right? Work stress, tiredness, whatever. I kept telling myself it was no big deal. But day after day, that gap between us stretched wider, and ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. The real kicker was her phone. Sure, Clara's always messed with it some, but now it's glued to her. She never lets it go. It's in her grip at the dinner table, propped up while we're zoned out in front of the TV. Her focus always somewhere else. Back in the day, she'd chuck it on the couch without a care, but now she clutches it tight, locking it fast if I so much as peek her way. It's the small stuff that gets me. Her slipping out of the room for calls, tilting the screen so I can't see, giggling at whatever's on there but going stone-faced at my one-liners. I tried to shrug it off, convince myself I was reading too much into it, but deep down, this uneasy twist in my gut kept tightening up. So one night, I decided to say something. We're parked across from each other at dinner, and she's scrolling again, barely poking at her plate. "Clara," I said, keeping my tone even-keeled. She just hummed, eyes still glued to her phone. "Hey, can we talk for a sec?" She let out a little sigh, locked her screen, and plopped it down. "What's up?" I paused, picking my words careful. I didn't want to blow out, just some clarity. "I don't know, babe. Feels like we're drifting apart these days." She blinked at me, her face blank as a slate. "Yeah, distant, like we're not clicking anymore. We hardly chat. You're always buried in your phone. It's like you're checked out, Clara." Something flashed in her eyes, irritation, maybe impatience. "James," she said, cool and steady, "not everything revolves around you." My stomach did a flip. "I ain't saying it does," I shot back, treading light. "I just want to figure out what's going on with us." She shook her head and looked off to the side. "You're always digging for answers, but some stuff doesn't come with a manual." I swallowed hard. "Then just level with me, Clara. Please." She leaned back in her chair with a sigh, looking worn out like she'd been dodging this talk for a while. "James, I don't think this is working anymore." My breath snagged in my chest. "What?" It came out quieter than I meant, almost a whisper. She stared down at the table. "I've been feeling this for a bit now. Didn't know how to spit it out, but I'm done faking it." She let out a long breath. Somewhere along the line, something flipped for me, and I can't rewind to how it used to be. My heart's hammering in my ears as I gawked at her. I'd played this convo out a million ways in my head, maybe a spat, maybe some mix-up we could sort out, but not this. "Is there another guy?" I blurted before I could stop myself. She froze for a beat too long. "James," she said soft-like, "does that even change anything?" It's like all the air got sucked out of the room. My hands balled up under the table. "Yeah, it changes a lot for me." She rubbed her temples with a sigh. "I don't want to crush you, but I also can't keep acting like I'm still in this." It felt like a sucker punch right to my core. 7 years of memories of me thinking we were building something real, and now she's sitting there, tearing it all down. "So you're saying there's nothing left?" My voice came out gritty, shaky. Clara finally locked eyes with me, and for the first time in weeks, I caught a real glimmer in her face, some mix of sorrow and guilt. "What I'm saying," she confessed, "is I don't know how to patch this up, and honestly, I don't even want to try." I just sat there, kinda numb, while she pushed up from the table. "Gotta get some air," she mumbled, snagging her phone off the surface. Then she was gone, just like that. I stayed put in the quiet, staring at the spot she'd left empty, my chest thumping hard, my brain spinning with all the stuff I should have said, all the things I wished I could fix. But way down deep, I knew something between us had cracked wide open, and I wasn't sure there was any gluing it back together. I sat there in the dining room's dim light, eyeballing the plate of food I hadn't touched. The house was dead quiet. Nothing but the faint rumble of a car rolling by outside every now and then, though my head was screaming loud enough to make up for it. Clara's words kept bouncing around in there, mocking me, playing on repeat like a broken record. "I don't think this is working anymore. Does it really matter?" It was nuts how she tossed it out so easy, like 7 years of us meant squat. Like it was just some minor hiccup she could shrug off. I'd poured years into believing we were solid, into trusting our connection. But now she checked out emotionally way before she ever walked out of that room. For a second, I let myself wonder if I was making it all up, if I was just overanalyzing everything, letting my feelings twist reality into something it wasn't. But no matter how hard I tried to talk myself out of it, the proof was staring me in the face. Clara wasn't the same anymore. These days, she barely glanced my way. Our talks had shrunk down to quick, forced little snippets. Her laughs? They were saved up for whoever was lighting up her phone screen, someone who could still get her grinning like I hadn't managed in forever. My eyes slid over to her phone, glowing faintly on the coffee table, flipped face down like always. That tiny detail chewed at me more than I'd ever admit. Time was, she'd leave it tossed anywhere without a care, but now it was her constant shadow, always angled just out of my sight. Then there were those calls, the ones she'd take in a whisper, sneaking off just far enough that I couldn't catch a word. If I wandered into the room, she'd cut it short, tossing out some lame excuse or huffing like I was the one barging in on her. Something was off, and I knew it. I'd known it for a while, but I just sat there like a chump, waiting, hoping she'd swing back around to me. Thing is, she wasn't coming back, not unless I figured out what had pulled her away in the first place. I sat up straighter. No yelling, no begging, no wallowing in some pathetic pity party. I was done with that. I wanted the truth, plain and simple. I logged into our shared phone account and pulled up the call logs. My heart was banging in my ears as I scrolled through. One number kept popping up over and over. Some calls were short, just a couple minutes, others dragged on close to an hour. They weren't one-offs, they were regular, steady, sneaking into our days and nights like clockwork. I jotted the number down and punched it into a search online, praying for a name, a clue, anything. Nada, just a blank, unregistered dead end. My fists tightened up. Who's she yakking with all the damn time? I muttered, shoving down the knot in my chest, and flipped over to her social media, digging through what she'd left visible. She'd gone all private lately, locked her accounts tight, cut back on posts, but nobody hides everything. And there it was, Jacob Blake. Seeing that name made my gut churn. I'd heard it before. Clara had dropped it a couple times way back, some old buddy of hers. She never said much about him, but now here he was, creeping back in while she'd pretty much iced me out. I clicked his profile, locked down, no posts, no info, just a wall. My breathing got shaky. My thumb hovered over my phone screen. I could call her out right then, demand she spill it, drag the truth into the light. But I could already hear her in my head, the sigh, the eye roll, that smug little chuckle like I was some paranoid fool. She'd already decided how she'd play this. Well, guess what? So had I. Later that night, after Clara had crashed out, I sat up in the dark, the low buzz of the house weighing on me like a heavy blanket. My head was a jumbled mess, spinning around the same ugly truth I couldn't shake. No way was I letting this slide. I grabbed the old tablet she hadn't touched in months and flicked it on. She'd never logged out. Lucky break for me. My hands were trembling as I popped open her email and started scrolling through her inbox. Then I spotted it, a string of messages from Jacob Blake. My breath hitched when I read the subject line. I sat there, gripping that tablet so tight my knuckles went white, feeling like I was floating outside my own body, stuck in some bad dream. She hadn't just drifted off, she'd made a choice to bail. Worst of all, she didn't even give me a shot to fight for us. In her heart, she was already gone, she just didn't have the guts to say it to my face. I snapped the tablet shut with a soft click, my chest heaving slow and steady. I'd wanted the real deal, and now I had it smack in front of me. Never in my life had I felt so damn alone. I was up before the sun, my body stiff as a board from another night of tossing and turning. The house sat quiet, too quiet, like all the unspoken junk between us was pushing against the walls, thick and heavy. Clara was still out cold, sleeping like nothing was wrong, totally unbothered. That hit me hard, twisting something deep inside. She'd peeled away from me bit by bit, so slow I didn't catch it till she was long gone. She'd turned into someone else, someone who didn't see me like she used to. Now I had to pick, keep chasing a ghost that wasn't there anymore, begging her to look at me again, or cut the cord. The answer sank into me, settling in my gut before my brain even caught up. I wasn't gonna grovel. No way was I gonna tear myself up clinging to ashes. She'd picked her path, time for me to pick mine. I eased out of bed real quiet, not 'cause I was scared of waking her for a showdown, but 'cause there wasn't a damn thing left to say. The guy staring back at me in the mirror looked beat. Eyes dull, shoulders sagging like he'd been hauling a load way too big for way too long. That's who I turned into, a shadow in my own life. A slow, hot anger started simmering in my belly, not at Clara, not even at Jacob Blake, that name that's been stalking my every thought, but at me. I'd let myself fade away, shrunk down into something small and weak. I wasn't the guy I used to be, the one who got Clara's eyes to light up the way her phone does now. Sure, I wasn't dumb enough to think a new do or some flashy shirts would fix it all, but one thing I knew for sure, I was done being the sorry version of myself. The gym was practically a ghost town when I rolled in, just the hum of treadmills and the steady clank of weights keeping me company, anchoring me in a way I didn't see coming. I'd forgotten how good it felt to push myself, that sweet burn in my muscles when I went hard. By the time I walked out, I was sore as hell, but my head was sharper than it had been in weeks. Turned into my new routine. Every morning before the job, I'd be there, testing my limits, clawing back the strength I used to have. I started zeroing in on myself like I hadn't in years, how my clothes hung on me, how I moved through a room. I ditched the old threads for stuff that made me feel like I still mattered, not some dude blending into the wallpaper. Got a fresh cut too, tight, crisp, something that made me feel like I was turning into someone again. It wasn't overnight, but every day, I could sense it building. Folks started picking up on it. At work, people were tossing out comments, how I looked different, how I had more pep in my step. Buddies I hadn't talked to in months, hell years, started hitting me up out of the blue. I made myself reach back out, said yes to hangouts, started filling my time with plans that didn't hinge on waiting for Clara to notice me. She saw it too. At first, she kept her mouth shut, but I'd catch her eyes darting over me when I walked in, lingering a tick longer than normal. She still didn't ask where I was headed when I'd bounce at night. She'd peek up from her phone, pause like she might say something, then clam up. One night, I'm standing in the hallway messing with my cufflinks in front of the mirror, and I catch Clara eyeing me from the couch. "Where you headed?" she asks, her tone all easygoing, but there's this weird edge to it I can't pin down. I don't even turn. "Out." "Who with?" she presses. I lock eyes with her through the reflection. "Some buddies." A quiet second hangs there before she gives a slow nod and looks off. Oh. She doesn't dig deeper, and I don't bother filling in the blanks. I don't owe her a damn thing, not anymore. That night, I'm up on a rooftop bar with some old pals, and for the first time in forever, Clara's not rattling around in my head. I'm not sitting there guessing what she's up to, not picking apart every little twitch or sigh she makes. I'm not stuck in that miserable loop, chasing after something that's never coming back. I'm finally stepping forward. When I roll in late, she's still up, propped in bed, thumbing through her phone. She barely gives me a glance as I walk in, her face a blank slate. I stand there a beat, half expecting her to pipe up, maybe ask how my night went, show even a flicker of giving a damn. Nada. And that's all I need to know. I'd spent months, hell, maybe years, hoping she'd see me again. But right then, it hits me, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm starting to see myself again, and that's plenty. Clara's parked on the couch, phone in her grip, scrolling through messages that don't seem to hook her like they used to. The screen's glow lights up her face in the dim living room, but her head's somewhere else, caught up in stuff she's trying not to face. Something's off. Started sneaking in slow, almost sneaky-like, but now it's too big to brush off. The house is quieter than it should be. Not that cozy silence we used to have, but an itchy kind that's got her on edge, like she's let something slip away without even clocking it. I've changed, and she's picking up on it. At first, it flew under her radar, the shifts were so tiny they didn't even blip. I started bolting out of bed earlier, slipping out of the house before she could even say a word. She figured it was just work, me diving into the job like I do when I need to tune out the noise. But it's not that, and she's catching on. There's a new vibe in how I carry myself, how I move through the day. I'm not hovering around her anymore, not fishing for her attention, not camped out in doorways waiting for a crumb of care. I'm pulling back. She told herself it didn't faze her at first. She's the one who checked out first, after all. She's the one who basically said we were done without saying it outright, the one who nudged me aside, smug as hell thinking I'd always stick around no matter how icy she got. It was a breeze for her to assume I'd never budge, that I'd stay put even if she froze me out completely. Same old James, the guy who'd built everything around her. But now, sitting in the dead quiet of our place, this slow, creepy feeling sinking in. I'm not waiting around anymore. She's clocking the small stuff. Me strolling in later than usual, barely giving her a nod when I hit the door. I've quit asking about her day, stopped trying to spark up chats, quit looking at her like I used to. She's been watching me, scrambling to figure out when it all flipped, but there's no big flashing sign, no single moment to point at. It's like I just woke up one morning and said, enough. The first time she caught me laughing, really laughing, not that fake chuckle for the TV or the half-assed one she'd gotten used to. It threw her for a loop. That real, deep laugh floated in from the next room while she sat there in the living room, and it hit her like a brick. She can't even recall the last time she heard me sound like that. I stroll into the room one night and I guess I'm looking different, not just 'cause of the new threads, though those are part of it. "Where've you been?" Clara blurts out before she can catch herself. I toss back a quick, flat, out. "Who with?" she pushes, and I can't tell why she's suddenly giving a damn. "Friends?" I say, plain and simple, but it lands like a smack across her face. Sure, I've always had buddies. She knows that. But somewhere along the line, she must have figured they'd faded out, that my whole world had boiled down to just our house, our marriage, her. Never crossed her mind I'd piece myself back together, start grabbing hold of the stuff she'd ignored. I wait to see if she'll dig deeper, maybe fish for details like I used to hand over without a fight. But she doesn't. Neither do I, just breeze right past her, leaving her sitting there, stewing in something that's starting to feel a lot like regret. Days roll by. She's got her eyes on me more now, sizing up how I walk, how I talk, how I'm not dragging around that thick silence that used to choke our place. I'm not holding my breath for her to come running back. One night, I'm smoothing out my shirt in front of the mirror, getting ready to head out again, and she pipes up before she can stop herself. "You're different," she says, voice low. I don't even flinch. Yep, that cold shrug of mine bites her deeper than she wants to let on. "Been thinking," she goes on, shifting a little, "about what I said way back." I finally turn, locking eyes with her, steady as hell. "Yeah? What about it?" She falters, letting out a shaky little laugh. "Didn't mean it, you know? Was pissed off. Just kidding around." For a second I just stare, and I can see her squirming under how quiet I'm staying. Then I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "That's a good one." She scrunches her brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You thinking it was a joke," I say, voice soft but dead serious. "You stared me down and said I was the biggest screw-up of your life. That ain't a punchline." She swallows hard. "You weren't messing around," I cut in, calm as a still lake. Every word was straight from the gut. She wants to argue, to swear it was just heat-of-the-moment crap, that she didn't mean to gut me. Trouble is, she's not sure that's true. Back then, she damn well believed it. "James," she starts, but I'm already turning, snagging my keys off the counter. She's stuck there, stiff as a statue, watching me walk out, no pause, no glance back. And right then, it clicks for her. She'd spent so long thinking she held all the cards, cocky as hell, that I'd always be parked there, waiting. But I'm done waiting. I've let it go. And now she's too late. I'm camped out in my car outside the law office, hands clamped on the wheel, staring at the building like it's some big final boss. The morning sun's slicing through the windshield, lighting up the stack of divorce papers chilling on the passenger seat, the last nail in the coffin. I'd pictured this scene 100 times over the past few weeks, wondering if I'd feel regret, rage, or some sappy sadness when it came down to it. But sitting there watching random people shuffle by on the sidewalk, I don't feel any of that. No second-guessing, no clinging to some dumb hope it could be fixed. Clara's been treating our marriage like a side note for too long, and now I'm ready to do the same. I take a deep breath, grab the folder, and step out of the car, the sharp fall air hitting me as I head for the door. The receptionist doesn't even glance up when I give my name, just waves me toward a chair in the waiting area. I drop into it, letting out a slow huff through my nose, my eyes wandering over the bland office, beige walls, a bunch of framed degrees, some fake plants standing stiff in the corner. It's a spot for endings, a pit stop where folks untie the knots of their lives, and I'm just another guy in the lineup cutting loose from something I thought was forever. The lawyer calls me in a few minutes later, and I trail him into a cramped office packed with thick books and tidy file stacks. The papers are already laid out on his desk. The guy, middle-aged, with tired eyes, slides a pen my way. "Sign these and we'll get it all filed. She'll get a copy, and unless she fights it, you won't have to show up for anything else." I let out a soft huff. No way she'd fight it, I figured. Clara had been acting like I was invisible for months, treating me like some old piece of furniture she'd outgrown in our own house. She wasn't gonna start scrapping for me now. I grabbed the pen and scratched my name across the line, smooth and steady, the last time I'd sign it as her husband. This weird vibe washed over me, not sadness, not freedom exactly, but some mix of the two. It was done. That hard truth sank deep into me, and for the first time in forever, that heavy pressure sitting on my chest started to ease up. That night, I didn't head straight back. Instead, I just drove, cruising through the city with no real plan, rolling past streets I knew like the back of my hand, spots that used to mean something. I ended up at this little bar I hadn't hit up in years, a joint I used to haunt before my life shrank down to just Clara and me. It crept up on me slow, more like a quiet unfolding than a big aha moment. I'd burned so much time chasing her approval, and now that it was out of the picture, all I felt was calm. I didn't have to prove jack to her anymore, didn't need her to tell me I was worth something. I'd walked away. When I finally got home, Clara was in the kitchen, leaning on the counter with a glass of water. She glanced up as I came in, her eyes flashing with something I couldn't read. There was a time I'd have dissected every inch of her face, hunting for a clue she still gave a damn. Now I just looked back at her, cool and unbothered. "Where you been?" she asked, keeping it light, but there was this tight edge in her voice that wasn't there before. I dropped my keys on the counter. "Seeing my lawyer." Her forehead creased a bit. "What for?" I didn't say a word, just pulled the folder out of my bag and set it down between us. The papers hit the surface with a soft, final thunk, and for the first time I saw a crack split through that blank look of hers. "You're divorcing me?" No real surprise in her tone, no gasp, just the slow dawning, like she was finally getting that I'd done what she never thought I would. "Yep," I said, plain as day. She let out a little puff of a laugh. "This is nuts. We don't need to go there." I cocked my head a touch. "Don't we?" She huffed sharp, crossing her arms. "Come on, this is over the top. We've got years together, you can't just trash that over some bumpy stretch." A dry, flat smile tugged at my lips. "Bumpy stretch?" I nodded at the papers. "You iced me out for months. Looked me dead in the face and said I was your biggest regret. Now that I'm walking, it's just a stretch." I was mad, I didn't mean it, she shot back. "You meant every damn syllable," I said, voice steady as a rock. "James, let's hash this out," she tried. "We're hashing right now," I said, smooth, "but it ain't changing squat." She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. "So that's it? You're just over it?" I let out a slow breath. "Yeah." The quiet stretched out thick, loaded with all the stuff we weren't saying. She stared at me, digging for something in my face, but whatever she wanted, it wasn't there. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of forms and details. We split up the stuff, figured out who'd live where, went through the drill of unpicking our lives apart. Clara didn't push back much, but there was this sharp bite in her silence, a pissed-off undercurrent simmering there. She never really thought I'd follow through till now. The day I boxed up the last of my gear, she stood in the doorway, arms folded tight. The house felt cold, hollowed out in a way it never had. I hefted my bag and turned for the door when she finally spoke up. "James?" I stopped. "I did," I said, quiet-like. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She just stood there, staring, the truth hitting her too late. I turned and walked out without another word. Those first weeks solo were odd. I'd wake up half expecting Clara's footsteps around the place, but every day that weight in my chest got lighter. I hung out with buddies more, took some trips, tried stuff I hadn't messed with in years, jumped back into the world like I'd been missing it. And for the first time in ages, I felt something new, something good, happy. One night, I'm sitting outside this cafe, sipping coffee, and I catch my reflection in the glass. I look different, tougher, more sure of myself. I'd spent so long being the guy tied to that marriage. Now I'm just James. And that's all I need.